And he really is inspiring at the moment. I think having born in 7:30 local time. So, Professor is fellow of the American Psychological Association. His primary scholarly interest in exploring the moral dimension of psychology, and currently his work is focused on the contribution of Aristotle's ethics to both psychology and conscious life. At this moment, I will not read the long list of his publications. You can read it in the information leaflet we provided you with. I just want to point out that just this month, right, he together with Catherine Gardner and Christianson published an article titled "A Multifunction Approach to Assessing Errors and Phronesis for History" in an important scientific journal, Personality and Individual Differences. In this article, they approximated the four-function model of practical system as described, with existing measures, and was especially interesting for us. The model correlated positively with the criterion measure of social behavior. It's very close to what we in our research team try to investigate for and has the potential to significantly teach the concept of clarification. In his lecture, Professor Fowers is going to reveal how practical research can help to guide character development regards developing flourishing students. The title he has chosen represents the central point of our ideas about ethical education in Slovakia. We can say that if we can choose a label for conception of ethical education in Slovakia, it could be the title of this presentation. Philia, friendship, and Phronesis, practical wisdom. Two cornerstones for character development. The professor, we are very thankful that you are here. And now I will turn the monitor, as you can see, all the audience, and be in a virtual contact with all the people. And then maybe if we have enough time, I think around 4 p.m. there could be a panel discussion with all four key speakers together, right on the afternoon program. So thank you very much once more time, and the screen is yours.
Thank you. There. I'm very happy to be with you. I'm sorry that it's virtual. I don't know if it was explained to you, but the reason that I'm not there is an important one. And I think in a way it exemplifies the talk of friendship and phronesis or practical wisdom. My daughter is getting married next week, and I just couldn't bear the thought of potentially getting sick on a trip and then missing her wedding. So I'm here in Miami just out of caution. I would really much rather be with you, but under the circumstances, I think this was the decision I had to make. Also, I want to thank you for indulging me by allowing me to speak in English. That's the only language I really command, and I admire you for being able to hear what I'm saying at all in English. So I will mix in a few Greek terms, but they're pretty simple ones, like Philia is what's usually translated as friendship, and Phronesis is often translated as practical wisdom. This is not going to be a course in Greek, the ancient Greek, but those are two words that are really important. And I think it's a great idea that the conference organizers have to think about character education in terms of these two key virtues. And I don't think they get quite enough attention, certainly not the attention they deserve. So let me start off by talking a little bit about friendship, and then I'll move on to talk about Philia, Phronesis, and talk about how the two can be integrated. So friendship, one of the things that's really interesting about Aristotelian ethics is that friendship is so prominent, it's central to the Nicomachean ethics, Aristotle's primary ethical work. And he thought that friendship was a key feature of a good life. So there are many people who agree with that, both in the ancient world and in the modern world. Certainly in psychology, looking at close relationships is one of the most important things in psychology in terms of how well someone fares in life. And Aristotle used the term philia. I want to spend just a second on that term because it's usually translated as friendship, but in the United States, at least, friendship usually refers to an affinity-based relationship. In other words, one that's about how similar we are, if we have positive feelings for each other, if we feel attachment and caring for each other. That's all great. That tends to be part of philia, but philia is much broader than that. It doesn't have to be an emotionally based friendship. It could also be a business relationship or a political relationship or a family relationship. So philia is a very broad term. And so the translation of friendship is a little bit misleading. However, if you're talking with youth, then friendship is a really great way to have a conversation with them because everyone cares about having friends. I have just read a series of papers in my undergraduate course here at the university, and about a third of them talk about that as the primary topic that they're interested in. A lot of them are in their first year of college, so they moved to Miami to attend school, and they're looking for friends. They're looking for their people at the University of Miami. That's a common struggle in students who move to a university, and I think it's a common struggle in high school and middle school and other places as well. So philia is a really central topic. Second thing to clarify about philia is that for Aristotle, it's both a virtue, that is a characteristic of an individual. Are you a good friend or are you not? To what degree are you able to be a good friend? And it's also a good, meaning that it's something that we strive for. It's a goal, it's an aim. We want to have friendship in our lives. It's something that we spend a lot of time on, a lot of effort on, and it makes a huge difference in how we fare in life. So, philia is both a virtue and a good. And I think that's important to recognize because sometimes it gets a little confusing. Because sometimes they'll talk about it as a virtue, sometimes they'll talk about it as a good. If you clear out the difference, then you won't be nearly as confused. I already mentioned that philia is more than affinity. Affinity, the English word, means emotional attraction, emotional harmony is what we tend to think about as friendship. But it's more than that. It could be, like I say, a business relationship. It could be that maybe you have a strong friendship with someone you're working with in the educational realm. And your friendship is based on the work you do together as educators. It's not that you spend a lot of leisure time together or have a close personal relationship in the sense of it being about emotions, but maybe it's more about the work you do. Finally, friendship is really key to flourishing. And I think that too often people neglect the concept of flourishing, which it also is expressed in Greek in the word eudaimonia. That is living well, having a complete life. And everything in the Nicomachean Ethics is directed toward flourishing or eudaimonia. And so that includes friendship. So the reason friendship is important is we are the kind of creatures that need people to love us. And we need to love other people. And if we're missing those elements in our lives, then our lives are impaired. And so the times that we feel that way, it's really important. And one of the ways to see the key centrality of friendship is by recognizing that what happens if we don't have friends? What happens if we're isolated and lonely? Well, the short answer to that question is people who are chronically isolated and lonely tend to die. They certainly languish. Depression is common, anxiety is common, a feeling of listlessness and meaninglessness happen. So friendship is really important. So if we have it, we can flourish. If we don't have it, we tend to languish. So that's the importance of friendship in our lives. And adolescents are particularly sensitive to this. Friendship is really key to them, everything they do. So now what Aristotle often does with any concept is he makes it a little more complicated. So he says friendship is important, but wait a second, folks. We have to think about how friendship is not just one thing. It's at least 3 different kinds of friendship he talks about. We could probably add a 4th or 5th, but we'll just talk about the 3 he talks about. And one type of friendship is a utilitarian friendship or a utility friendship. And what that means is that this is a friendship that I get benefits from. So I give my friend benefits, and my friend gives me benefits, and that's the primary point of the relationship, is to benefit each other. And so utility friendships are actually quite good. I exercised a utility friendship yesterday when I got a haircut. My barber, I've known him now for 10 years. He cuts my hair, we have nice conversations, but it's mostly about getting a haircut. The only time I ever see him is to get a haircut. And then when he cuts my hair, I pay him. So that's a utility friendship, we're exchanging a benefit. A second kind of friendship is a pleasure friendship. That the point of the relationship is that we enjoy it, that is fun for us. So maybe I might have a pleasure friendship with someone I go to sporting events with. Or maybe I go to the movies or go on a hike with this person. And it's really just about enjoying the person's company. It's not that they do anything special for me or that we have a deeper connection, just that we enjoy certain activities together. Or we just enjoy conversing, let's say. Lots of us have friends like that. What I can tell you is that in psychology in the United States, one of the places that I've done a lot of research is in an area of relationships, primarily romantic relationships, but also friendships. And the way most people think about romantic relationships is almost entirely as a pleasure friendship. That is, people are in romantic relationships because they enjoy them, because they're satisfied by it, because they find pleasure in being together. And if the pleasure stops, then often, at least again in the United States, the relationship stops. So it's a very limited way to see friendships. But at the same time, what I want to say is both utility and pleasure friendships are good. Aristotle would never be critical of someone for having one of these kinds of relationships or several of these kinds of relationships. They're good. We need people to enjoy, and we need people who benefit. So there's nothing wrong with that. But he did talk about a third kind of friendship that's more important, and that's character friendship. With character friendship, what we're concerned with is we're working together to accomplish some good. That's the case I mentioned to you before. Maybe you have a friend that you work closely with in the educational setting. You want to approach the good of educating young people. And that's a very important thing for our society, for those young people. And that could be a character friendship. So one of the features of a character friendship is that it usually involves pursuit of some good together, something that you both care about deeply. Second part of character friendship is you care about the well-being of your partner. So whoever that is, whether it's a friend or a business associate or a family member or a lover, their well-being is extremely important to you. You're willing to do as much for their well-being as you are for your own. So that's another important feature of character friendships. And Aristotle called character friends another self. What he meant by that, that's the English translation, that's not the Greek. But what he means by that is that we have some similarity, and we're like a reflection of one another. We can see ourselves in our friend, and our friend can see themselves in us. And so we tend to support, and guide, and help each other. One of the very best things character friends can do for each other is to be critical friends, sometimes give feedback about things that are hard to hear, difficult to manage. So someone might give me feedback about how maybe I do too much lecturing in my leisure time. So when I'm at a party, I shouldn't give a lecture. And if I happen to give a lecture and you happen to be there, you would be my friend for reminding me not to do that, because that's not a very good idea. People don't appreciate it. But as a professor, that's something I'm inclined to do. So being able to give each other this feedback is possible because character friendships have a depth and a length that provides room for them. So there's sufficient space for that kind of interaction. So someone can tell me something that's hard for me to hear, that's difficult to manage emotionally maybe, but because I love them and I know they love me, it's easier to manage. So what you can see from this is that friendship is a complex matter. It's not something that's simple. And so that's one of the things that Aristotle is well known for, is dealing with a lot of complexity. And he does that partly by talking about particulars, and that the specifics of each friendship matter, and that there isn't some kind of global abstract concept of friendship that just gets applied to different relationships. Instead, what we do is we pay attention to the specific relationship at the specific time and what does it mean to us, and how should we orient ourselves to it. And as I mentioned, friendship is central to flourishing, to good life, to ethics, to morality. One of the things I think is really interesting is to stop and think about how many modern philosophers talk about friendship as an important characteristic or as an important goal or end. Not many. So Aristotle is very different in that way. But if you stop and think about it, how good a life could you live without friends? What sort of happiness or flourishing or fulfillment would you have if you didn't have any close friends? No one would care about you, and knowing that you can invest your own caring in it. That would be a very impoverished life, in my view. So from an Aristotelian perspective, that's really central to what we mean by living a good life as a human being. And part of what I like about Aristotle is that he takes human beings as natural creatures that require certain things in order to live well. Friendship is one of those things. So that centrality is really important. Now, if you're familiar at all with virtue ethics, and I use words like complexity and centrality, you're wondering, when is he going to start talking about phronesis? Because if we have something that's very complex and very important, phronesis is going to be the key thing, the key way for us to deal with it. And so now is the time for us to switch our topic to phronesis, and I'll tell you a little bit about my thoughts about that, and then I'll talk about how to integrate the two. I think this conjunction is very important, like I said at the beginning. Philia is extremely important to young people, and one of the things that we try our best to do with young people is to try to help them make wise decisions. And one of the places we need to make wise decisions is with our friends. Because one of the biggest determinants or factors in how young people do in life is who they choose as a friend. I could tell you a long story if I had a little more time about my son and his choice of friends and how we tried to guide him with that. But he did have a friend that I think they were very close, they really liked each other, but this friend was trouble, and I could see it from a mile away. So I gently tried to guide my son to spend more time with other friends, and he eventually did. And now my son is 33, and he has the same friends that he had in high school. He's still very close with, and they were wonderful influences on him. They became a part of our family. So I think the choice of friends is key. Had he chosen this other friend over the ones that he has now, I think his life would have turned out very differently. Unfortunately, this young man ended up in jail for a period of time on a drug charge, and I'm not sure how he fared after that. That was the last thing I heard about him. So I think the choice of friends is extremely important. So we want young people to be able to make wise choices. So let me tell you a little bit about phronesis and how we think it works. In the introduction, the article was mentioned about the four-component model. And that's the way I want to talk about it. But first, I want to tell you that phronesis is what we could call a meta virtue. In English, the term meta means it's a virtue that guides other virtues. It's a virtue that is at a higher order than other virtues. So the way I think about phronesis is that it helps to guide us in how we express or manifest all the other virtues. And friendship is no exception to that. So let me talk a little bit about what the four parts of phronesis are. Then I'll switch gears and talk about how they work with friendship in my view. So the first component we call the constitutive component. That's a big word in English, and if you just think about the term constitutive, what it means is that phronesis helps to constitute the other virtues. So it tells us, it gives us a moral perception of what's important in a situation. So whenever we encounter a situation, I'll say this to my students all the time, how often do situations come with labels? Is there a label above the room you walk into, or when you enter a relationship or you're having a conversation with someone, do you get a label about what's it really about? So you're guided? No, you don't. We have to figure out what those labels are, and that we call moral perception. So what is it that we need to see? Well, we need to be able to tell what's important and what's trivial. We need to tell what's central and what's peripheral. So in order to be able to do that, we need the perception to understand what's really important in a situation. And that's the constitutive component or the moral perception. Tells us what the situation is about. So we can then think about which virtue would be most important. Is this a situation where generosity would be really helpful? Or is this a situation where justice is called for? Or is it more a situation where compassion is called for? We can all think of the circumstances that might lead us to think one way or another on that. So the constitutive component guides us in terms of which virtue is appropriate here. And as I'll talk about in a minute, it also guides us in terms of what would it mean to express that virtue in a situation? What would be virtuously compassionate? What would be virtuously generous? Because we can obviously go wrong and be extravagant or stingy when it comes to giving rather than generous. So practical wisdom helps us with all that perceptual work. It's one of the really important things it does. A second piece of practical wisdom, and this is really important, a lot of people have neglected this, is that it helps us to harmonize different virtues. So one of the things about human life is that it's very complicated. And often enough, there isn't just one virtue that's going to serve us well. So we might be in a situation where, let's say, both compassion and honesty are important. I can tell you that in the work I do with preparing counselors and psychotherapists, that's often the case. So it's very frequently that counselors are in a position where they need to tell someone something that's very hard to hear, or help someone to realize something about themselves that they may not want to accept. That maybe they are really scared, or they're trying to control the people in their lives, or they think they're just being loving and caring. So in that case, the counselor needs both honesty and compassion. If you're just honest and you just say it, you just blurt it out, most people can't hear that. So you need to be able to deliver that message in a compassionate way. So the question is then, do you emphasize honesty and just have compassion as a correlate? Or is compassion the primary thing and honesty is a secondary thing? So we might be honestly compassionate or compassionately honest. So we have to work that out. That's what how practical wisdom helps us to adjudicate or harmonize those virtues. In some cases, we might say, well, really the bottom line here is honesty. Compassion has to take a back seat. We could be compassionate later, but right now we just need to be very direct and honest. Or on the other hand, someone might be suffering so much, they won't be able to hear a thing we say unless we are first compassionate. And that's our primary response. Maybe later we can get it more honest. So that adjudication and harmonizing is a really important function. I'll talk about that some more in friendship too. The third feature we call emotional regulation. Now that can give you the wrong idea and make it seem like our cognition is just going to control our emotions. That's not what we're talking about at all. I think the best way to think about cognition and emotion is they usually act in tandem. But what we want to do with emotional regulation, what the frontalmost, that's the wise person, what the frontalmost can do is infuse their emotion with reason. So we don't have emotional reactions to every situation we face. That's just common and typical, and it's part of what it means to be a human being. But what we want to do is be able to see the situation rightly and in a reasoned way so that our emotions are appropriate and lend themselves to virtuous activity. So I might see a situation where someone is acting very anxiously and difficult, and maybe my first reaction is that maybe I want to turn away because I don't want to deal with all the anxiety. But my second reaction needs to be, wait a second, they're saying that something important might go wrong for them. And it's really important for me to help them figure out a way for it to go right. And this is particularly true of students. They're often very anxious, and our first reaction may not be the best one. So we need to reappraise the situation, we need to rethink it so that we can act more appropriately. So if someone's being very anxious, then maybe what I want to do is really emphasize again the compassion for that anxiety or that worry that they have. And that's how emotional regulation works, is harmonizing emotions with reason. And then finally, we have what we call a blueprint function, which suggests a very, I'm not fond of this term because it suggests too organized a view. Basically, what we mean is that people who have phronesis have an overall sense, an overall perception of what a good life looks like. And they have an idea about how they can approach that life. And that's constantly shifting and changing based on the circumstances we're dealing with. But we have an idea of where we're going and how to get there. That's what a blueprint function is. So it's not a firm, clear, detailed picture. It's one that's a little bit more intuitive and a little bit more flexible than that. Okay, so those are the 4 components of Phronesis. They help to guide all the virtues, and that including generosity, loyalty, friendship, justice, all kinds of things it helps us with. So how does it help us specifically with friendship? That's our next question. So with the constitutive component, we need to understand Philia in our concrete lives, that is, in the situations we face. And so what the constitutive function does is it helps us to understand what would it mean to be a character friend in this situation. What should a character friend do right now? Should I be primarily compassionate? Should I really be focused on fairness between us? Should I be dealing with something else that has to do with our friendship? Is it just time for me to express my love and commitment to my friend? Phronesis helps us to understand what's important right now. What should we do? That's the constitutive function. How can I best be a friend right now? So that's the way that one works. Now with the adjudicative function, sometimes in our friendships we have to deal with other things. So let's say this is a situation I frequently face, where I'm on a committee that's deciding about an award. And one of my students that I spent many, many hours with and I'm very fond of and have a really strong working relationship is one of the candidates for the award. Now in that situation, I need to be very careful so that I'm fair to other people and not just favoring my student who I would consider a Philia or a friend in Aristotle's sense. So if I just go with my immediate feelings, it would be, oh, give the word to my friend because I like them and I know how hard they are. But that wouldn't be the right answer because it might be that someone else has more merit and deserves this award better than my student does. So I have to harmonize a larger sense of justice with my friendship. Now let's say that we decide to give this award to someone other than my student. Now I need to be compassionate and understanding and supportive of my student. They didn't get the award, they're disappointed. And that all makes sense. So I need to be able to respond to that disappointment in a positive way. So this is how we harmonize multiple virtues. We could think about that in terms of generosity and friendship. How do we harmonize how much we give to our friends? We might be inclined to give too much or too little, and we need to work on that. The emotional regulation part is, again, understanding what's happening right now and what's the best way to interpret the situation. So by doing that, it allows me, again, to be a good friend because I can bring my reasoning ability into this so that I understand the situation in the best way and I can be the most supportive that I can be, or the most caring, or the most fair, or whatever it is that's really important there. I need to see it rightly, and that's how the reason helps us to guide our emotion. The word in English is appraisal. So how do we interpret the situation? What do we make of it? What do we think is happening here? Okay, and then the fourth one is we need to see the place of a given friendship in a complete life. And Aristotle's given us a big clue there. So I forgot to tell you that in the Nicomachean Ethics, you probably know that there are 10 books. We would probably call them chapters, but in Aristotle's time they were called books. So it's comprised by 10 books. 2 of the 10 are about friendship. So 20% of his ethics is devoted to close personal relationships. And I think that's fabulous. So he's telling us the place of friendship. It's right at the center. And so we need to be able to be good to our friends. We need to be able to appreciate those friendships, understand them as key to our lives, and then we will give them the attention and care that they deserve. And that's what we want to do. And so I thought I had another bullet point there, but I don't. here are some citations. I've sent these slides to the conference organizers so you can have access to them, or you can send me an email if you like, and I can send you any of these publications, except the books. I can't send you the books, but I can send you any of the articles that are on there. And these are publications that give us some insight into this. Some of them are data-based, and some of them are conceptual. I happen to see both forms of knowledge as really important. We need to have a good understanding of the concepts we have, but we also need to make sure that they are related to data that come from the real world and not just part of our fevered imaginations. So I think that with these tools, we can work with youth to help them understand how to be a good friend, how to have friendship in their lives, and how to have that be a positive element in their lives. So having a good sense of how to flourish overall will help to guide them in their choices and help them to be more wise in their choices. So I thank you for your attention. Again, I wish I were there with you. I think it would be a more fun place to be than Miami is right now. Like I say, I'm giving my daughter her due. I'm showing for her wedding. I'm knocking on wood because that's what we do for luck here. That I'll be well and that we'll have a great celebration next week. But I miss being with you, and I hope you have a great conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Yes, there were, the address was integrating all of knowledge about the relationship between the Phronesis and the friendship. However, still there arise many questions. Maybe you have written some of them at this moment. For example, yes, the Phronesis works like the method for choosing the friendship, or it's not there, like friendship simply happens, and then during the friendship I have to find the way how to heal the friendship to be more religious, or yes, according to Professor's lecture, Phronesis guides Philia. But what if Philia is guiding Phronesis? For example, in the 13th chapter of Corinthians, yeah, you can read. So yeah, I can find, if I speak in tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I'm only a resounding gong of the and you know, the very principal question is, what is guiding Phronesis? And maybe it's not time now to answer, but we can discuss during the panel discussion. Thank you very much for the lecture, and see you later. Thank you very much. Bye.